Okay, here's a wild thought for you. What if consciousness isn't something that's just locked away inside our skulls? What if it's a basic feature of the universe, woven into the very fabric of reality, just like gravity or time? It's one of the most mind-bending ideas out there, and today we're diving right in. But first, I want you to really think about this for a second. Why does seeing the color red feel like anything at all? I'm not talking about the physics of light or the biology of your eyeball. I mean the actual, private, inner experience of redness. Why isn't it all just blank inside? This simple question, it turns out, is the key to one of the biggest mysteries in all of science. And this is where we hit a massive brick wall in our understanding. Look, science is incredible at explaining the how. It can tell you exactly how your brain processes wavelengths of light and how your neurons fire in response. But it completely stumbles when it tries to explain the why. Why should all that physical wiring create a subjective feeling? That chasm, that gap between the physical and the mental, is where our investigation begins. So this giant puzzle actually has a name. It's called the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by the philosopher David Chalmers. And it boils down to this. How does physical stuff, atoms, neurons, all that gunk, give rise to the rich inner movie that is your conscious experience? Now, the standard mainstream answer for a long time has been this idea of emergence. The theory goes that consciousness just sort of appears when you get enough simple, non-conscious things and arrange them in a super complex way, like in a brain. Kind of like how wetness emerges from a bunch of H2O molecules, even though a single molecule isn't wet. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. There is absolutely nothing in the laws of physics that explains this magical leap. How do a bunch of mindless atoms, no matter how cleverly you arrange them, suddenly flip a switch and start to feel something? It's like building the world's most complicated computer and just expecting it to suddenly start feeling lonely. It just doesn't follow. So that emergence theory, it kind of leaves us relying on a miracle. So what if we've been looking at the problem all wrong? What if the issue isn't our explanation, but our most basic assumption about what matter is? And that brings us to a really radical alternative, panpsychism. It's an idea that flips the entire problem on its head. So what is panpsychism? The core idea is that consciousness didn't just emerge out of matter at some point. It was in matter all along. The theory says that consciousness, in some super simple, basic form, is a fundamental property of the universe, right alongside things we already accept, like mass or electric charge. Now, it's not just one single idea. Think of it more like a family of related theories. You've got micropsychism, which is the boldest version. It says a single electron literally has some tiny primitive bit of experience. Then there's panprotopsychism, which is a little more cautious. It says particles have the raw ingredients for consciousness. And there's dual-aspect monism, which says mind and matter are just two different ways of looking at the very same underlying reality. And I know what you might be thinking. This sounds kind of wacky, maybe a little out there. But before you write it off, you should know that this idea has some serious historical street cred. It's been considered by some of the greatest thinkers in history. I mean, we're talking way back. The ancient Greeks, like Thales, hinted at a world filled with some kind of spirit. Then you flash forward to the 17th century, and the great philosopher Baruch Spinoza built a whole system around it. And even in the 20th century, brilliant minds like Alfred North Whitehead argued that experience itself is the fundamental stuff the universe is made of. So why are serious philosophers and even some scientists dusting off this ancient idea today? Well, because it offers a stunningly elegant solution to that hard problem we talked about. The logic goes like this. Step 1, you assume consciousness is fundamental. It doesn't have to pop into existence out of nowhere. Step 2, this means the brain's job isn't to create consciousness from scratch. Instead, the brain is like a complex amplifier or an organizing system. It takes billions of tiny, simple streams of experience that are already there in its atoms and combines them into the single, rich, complex consciousness that is you. And step 3, poof, the hard problem just vanishes. There's no magical leap to explain. And this view also helps clean up a few other messy problems. For example, you no longer have to wonder when, in evolution, consciousness just magically appeared. The answer is, it was always there, just in simpler forms. It also paints a much more unified picture of the cosmos, where our minds aren't some weird fluke, but are deeply connected to the rest of the universe. Okay, but let's be real. If it were that simple, everyone would be a panpsychist. This theory comes with its own set of huge, thorny problems that keep it pretty far from the scientific mainstream. And this brings us to the absolute killer question, the one that stumps pretty much everyone. It's called the combination problem. Okay, let's say an electron has a little bit of consciousness. Fine. How do the trillions of little consciousnesses in your brain combine to form your one single unified experience of the world right now? Honestly, nobody has a convincing answer to the combination problem. It's the theory's Achilles heel. On top of that, how could you ever prove this stuff scientifically? You can't exactly build a machine to measure the feelings of a quark. That makes it really hard to test. And let's just admit it, the idea that the chair you're sitting on has some form of experience is, well, it's deeply weird and goes against all our common sense. But despite all those massive problems, let's just suspend our disbelief for a second. Let's play a game of what if. What if panpsychism, or something like it, is actually true? The implications are absolutely staggering. I mean, if tiny consciousnesses can combine to form us, what's to stop them from combining on an even grander scale? Could a planet, a star, or maybe even an entire galaxy have its own form of consciousness, operating on a timescale so vast we couldn't even recognize it? And think about what that means for ethics. If everything has at least some tiny flicker of experience, does that change how we treat, well, everything? It would completely redefine our relationship with the natural world, to say the least. It even reframes how we think about cutting-edge tech like artificial intelligence. Maybe we've been going about it all wrong. Maybe the goal isn't to create a conscious machine out of dead matter, but to build a system that can properly orchestrate the consciousness that's already inherent in its physical parts. So in the end, we're left with two radically different pictures of our reality. In one version, the universe is a vast, dark, and mindless machine. It's fundamentally empty, and our consciousness is just a bizarre, lonely little accident, a flicker of light in an endless void. But in the other, more radical view, consciousness isn't the fluke, it's the foundation. The universe isn't a dead machine that's somehow produced life. It's fundamentally experiential. In this picture, consciousness isn't the flicker in the dark, it's the sea itself, and we're just now, finally, beginning to realize that we're wet. And that is a thought that can change how you see everything.